I didn't know that last verse there. It's always good to learn something new. I'm David, by the way. I'm the minister of the Baptist Church. I'm the one who got to wear the Christmas jumper. Well, it's the first time this year, actually. Anyway, I was thinking about the silent night. I don't think it was a particularly silent night with a crying baby and those breathless shepherds running in, kind of asking everybody where the baby was. Angels singing, I mean, presumably not silently. And then, of course, you have those three wise men, or whatever you want to call them. Here's three good questions relating to them. Well, one is, when did they arrive? They did not arrive the same night as the shepherds. It's quite a lot later, but never mind. But there are three good questions to ask about these wise men. How many were the three wise men from the east? What were the three wise men from the east? And where did the three wise men from the east come from? And of course, the answer to all three questions is, well, we don't really know. Especially the first one, because the Bible never says how many there were of them. It's plural, so there had to be more than one. But it could be two, there could have been 15. All we know is that they brought three different gifts. But that doesn't mean that there were three of them. And it definitely doesn't say that they were kings. That is a later embellishment based on certain Old Testament prophecies. What it does say was that they were Magi. Not quite the same as magicians, but still the same root. They were stargazers. They were, well, the scientists of their day, really, mixing astronomy and astrology and history and religion. They were scholars. It's just that they studied some things that we might not feel totally sure about today. But they knew something. They had got something right. So they were wise men, if you like. We can call them wise men, shall we? It does tell us that they came from away, to quote a popular musical, came from the east. Still rather unspecified, but there we are. They were foreigners. And in that way, you can say that they represent us, the non-Jewish part of the world population. Because most Jews 2,000 years ago, they were waiting eagerly for the Messiah, the promised king, the descendant of David, who would come and, well, restore, if not law and order, at least justice and righteousness, and kick the Romans out of Israel. Establish the land of King David as an independent kingdom of then. Everybody was waiting for that. Well, except possibly for King Herod. But I think we can safely assume that most of them assumed that when the Messiah came, he would only be the king of the Jews. After all, that is what the Magi tell King Herod when they pop in with their unexpected and unwelcome news about the new king having been born. Where is the newborn King of the Jews? And let's not forget that that title reappears later in the story on a piece of parchment nailed to a certain cross. But we're running ahead of ourselves. There's one thing we do know from the Bible, and that is that the Magi brought gifts. And if I'd been asked to speak a bit earlier than kind of late last night when Charles called in sick, I might have suggested that we sing the carol, We Three Kings of Orient Are, because I like that carol, and it goes well with that reading, even if they weren't kings. And partly because in that carol, those three gifts are seen as being symbols of who Jesus really is and what he came to do. First one's gold. Gold for the king. And they come looking for the king, so that was fairly obvious. And I don't think I'm going to surprise anybody here if I say that Jesus really is the king, the promised son of David. And the fact that these far-flung foreigners came to worship him reminds us that he came to be king of all the world, the King of Kings, the ruler of the universe, not just of the nation of Israel, but everywhere. But it also reminds us, and maybe even more importantly, that anyone who wants to, Jew, Gentile, male, female, young, old, rich or poor, whoever you are, wherever you are, anyone and everyone can become a citizen of his kingdom. It is open to everyone. Now that is good news, isn't it? So that's the gold. And then we have the frankincense, or incense, depending on which translation you read. Jesus is worthy of worship. That's what incense does, it's worship. Because he isn't just an exciting baby. I mean, all babies are worthy to be, if not worshipped, at least carried around and played with and adored. But Jesus isn't just any old baby, and he's not just a baby born to be king. He is God Almighty, Emmanuel, God with us. He came down from earth to heaven, who is God and Lord of all. Oh, from heaven, to earth from heaven. Yes, you're right. Somebody's paying attention. To earth from heaven, who is God and Lord of all. Veiled in flesh, the Godhead see. Hail, the incarnate deity. He is God on earth in human shoes. Very much worthy of worship. But the incense could also be seen as an indication of Jesus' ministry as the high priest. The book of Hebrews talks a lot about that. The high priest who comes, well, between us and God, if you like, the intermediate, the mediator, the God-man, who brings the definitive sacrifice, securing eternal forgiveness for all who will receive. And then there's the myrrh, which reminds us that he himself is the sacrifice. I don't know what Moses would have made of that when he was writing down the sacrificial law, that one day you would have somebody who was both the high priest and the sacrifice. But that's what happens. Jesus is a sacrifice who dies on that cross with that title, King of the Jews, above him for us in our place. Christmas and Easter need each other. Christmas wouldn't really mean anything without the cross and the resurrection at Easter, but Easter wouldn't be possible without Christmas. Jesus had to be born as a human. He had to live a perfect human life in order to be the perfect sacrifice, so that he can die for us to be forgiven, so that he can rise in order for us to live forever with him. Now, I don't think the Magi knew this. Did Mary know this? Well, that's another song you can sing in another service. It's hard to know. But we know. And we know a lot more than the Magi. And we're definitely in a better situation than the Magi. They had to travel a very, very long way to come to worship the King, Jesus. We don't have to travel at all. I mean, we all traveled a bit to come here tonight. But we can worship anywhere, everywhere. We don't need to go away to worship Jesus. The Magi brought gifts, which is natural enough when you go to visit a king, and we carry on the tradition of giving each other gifts at Christmas. But we do know that the biggest gift of all is what God gave to us in Jesus. And the Magi were told not to tell Herod. We have been given the opposite command. We have been told to go out and tell everybody. Make disciples of all the world. Be my witnesses everywhere. We have that command. We would tell Herod if he was around. Tell everybody, high and low, friend and enemy, neighbors and far-flung relatives. Tell them about Jesus the King. Tell them that there is somebody else that should be part of your Christmas celebrations. And no, we don't need to buy him presents. He doesn't need new socks or a new set of screwdrivers. Because actually, he's more interested in people than in things. And you know what? Mariah Carey was right. Go out and tell people that all Jesus wants for Christmas is you.